and Merry Christmas Eve. I've stopped by the Cloquet Public Library to read you a story. This story is called Betsy, Tacy, and Tib Go Christmas Shopping. It was written by Maude Hart Lovelace, who's from Minnesota. Please, sit down and listen to my story. School closed for the Christmas vacation. That meant that Betsy, Tacy, and Tib had an important engagement. For years, on the first day of Christmas vacation, they had gone shopping together. Let's take Winona this year, Tib suggested. Winona had come to be quite a friend of theirs. They often stopped after school to slide down her terrace, a particularly steep and hazardous one, or to play show in her dining room. Winona loved to play show. She was always the villainess. I'd like to take her, said Tacy. She'd be pretty surprised, I guess, at the way we shop. She certainly would be, said Betsy, and all of them laughed. You see, Betsy explained to Winona when they invited her, we usually make our Christmas presents, or else our mothers buy them for us. The ones we give away, I mean. Then why do you go shopping? Winona asked. We go shopping to shop, said Tacy. The three of them smiled. Winona looked mystified. We've done it the same way ever since we were children, said Betsy. We always take 10 cents apiece, and we always buy just the same things. What do you buy? You'll see, said Betsy, if you come along. They liked to tease Winona because she was such a tease herself. Winona's black eyes snapped. I'll come, she said. They made plans to meet the next day at 2:15. Winona was waiting in front of her house wearing a crimson coat and hat. She looked like a rakish cardinal against the snow. Does it matter, she asked, swinging her pocketbook, if I take more than 10 cents? Of course it matters. It isn't allowed. Betsy, Tacy, and Tib were noisily indignant. That's all I've got anyway, Winona grinned. Just asked for fun. You go way back and sit down, Tacy said. They started off downtown. The fluffy white drifts had packed into hard ramparts guarding the sidewalks. The four had to keep to the sidewalks after they passed Lincoln Park. The streets were crowded with sleigh and cutters. Chiming bells added to the Christmassy feeling in the air. Front Street was very Christmassy. Evergreen boughs and holly wreaths, red bells, and mistletoe sprays surrounded displays of tempting merchandise in all the store windows. In one window, a life-size Santa Claus with a brimming pack on his back was halfway into a papier-mâché chimney. Look here, said Winona, stopping to admire. This will tickle the little kids. The little kids? Oh, the ones that believe in Santa Claus. Gee whiz, said Betsy. I didn't think we were little kids anymore. I thought we were 12 years old. Didn't you, Tacy? I was under that impression, said Tacy. Why, we are. What do you mean? Asked Tib. Winona knew what they meant. Are you trying to tell me, she asked, that you believe in Santa Claus? Certainly Certainly we do, they answered. Well, of all, began Winona. She stopped, words failing her, and looked at them with a scorn which changed to suspicion as she viewed their broadly smiling faces. I expect to believe in Santa Claus when I'm in high school, said Tacy. I expect to believe in him when I'm grown up and married, said Betsy. I hear him on the roof every year. Don't you, Tacy? Sure I do, and I've seen the reindeer go past the bedroom window lots of times. You see, explained Tib, we've made an arrangement about him. We've crossed our hearts and even signed a paper. You three take the cake, said Winona. All right, I believe in him too. They came to Cook's bookstore. We start here. Is that where we spend our dimes? Asked Winona. Mercy, no. We don't spend them for hours yet. We just shop. Choose a present. I know what I'm going to choose, said Betsy. Little men. I got Little Women last year. They went in and said hello to Mr. Cook. His bright eyes looked out sharply under his silky toupee. You never pass me up, do you? He said. He said it good-naturedly, though. This year we brought Winona Root. She's another customer for you, Mr. Cook, said Tib. Customer, said Mr. Look. Customer, oh, well, look around. They looked around. They looked around thoroughly. They read snatches in the Christmas books. They studied the directions of all the games. Tacy chose a pencil set, and Tib chose colored crayons. Choose. Go ahead and choose. Choose whatever you like, they urged Winona hospitably. Winona chose a book about Native Americans. They went next door to the harness and saddle maker's shop. There wasn't much to choose here, just whips and buggy robes. Getting into the spirit of the game, Winona cracked a dozen whips whoosh, before she chose one. Betsy and Tacy chose robes with landscapes painted on them. There was a tall wooden horse standing in the window. It was almost 7 feet tall, dapple gray with flashing eyes and springy mane and tail. Every year the harness and saddle maker let Tib sit on the horse. He looked at her sadly now as she put her foot in a stirrup and swung nimbly upward. If the horseless carriages keep coming to town, I'll have to take that fellow down, he said. That gave Tib an idea. I know what I'll choose then, she cried. I'll choose this horse. I'll put him up in our backyard and all of us can ride him. Tib, what fun! I wish I'd thought to choose him. It's a spiffy idea, Tib, Betsy cried. Winona had an even spiffier. Let's go choose horseless carriages, she suggested nonchalantly. The hardware store man sells them. For a moment, Betsy, Tacy, and Tib were dazzled by the brilliant plan. Then Tib scrambled down from the horse. Saying goodbye to the melancholy harness and saddle maker, they raced to the hardware store. Sure enough, there was a horseless carriage on display there. They inspected it from every angle, and the curly-haired hardware store man let them sit in it for a while. He was very obliging. All 4 of them chose it, and while they were in the store, they looked at skates and bicycles. I could use a new sled, said Winona. so they looked at sleds too. At the Lion department store, they shopped even more extensively. There were many departments, and they visited them all. The busy clerks paid little attention to them. They wandered happily about. They chose rhinestone side combs, jeweled hat pins, gay pompadour poufs. They chose fluffy collars and belts and pocketbooks. They chose black lace stockings, taffeta petticoats, and embroidered corset covers. It was hard to tear themselves away, but they did so at last. They went to the drugstore, where they sniffed assiduously. They sniffed every kind of perfume in the store before they chose, finally, rose and lilac and violet and new mown hay. I want new mown hay because it's the kind Mrs. Poppy uses, Betsy said. Mrs. Poppy, exclaimed Tacy. That reminds me of her party. We'd better go to the jewelry store and choose some jewels. Goodness, yes, said Betsy. I need a diamond ring to wear to that party. They hurried to the jewelry store. The clerks there weren't very helpful, however. They wouldn't let them try on diamond rings or necklaces or bracelets. They wouldn't even let them handle the fat gold watches with doves engraved on the sides, which looked so fashionable pinned to a shirtwaist. They act this way every year, said Betsy to Winona. Let's go to the toy shop. That's the nicest anyhow. The toy shop was what they had all been waiting for. They had been holding it off in order to have it still ahead of them, but the time for it had come at last. At the toy shop, it was difficult to choose. In blissful indecision, they circled the table of dolls. Yellow-haired dolls with blue dresses, black-haired dolls with pink dresses, baby dolls, boy dolls. Betsy, Tacy, and Tib, and Winona had stopped playing with dolls, except on days when they were sick, perhaps, or when stormy weather kept them indoors. Yet choosing dolls was the most fun of all. They liked the dolls' appurtenances, too. They inspected doll dishes, doll stoves, sets of shiny doll tinware, doll parlor sets. There was one magnificent dollhouse, complete even to the kitchen. Winona asked the price of it. $25. Well, it's worth it, said Winona, thoughtfully swinging her pocketbook. When they were through with the dolls, they began on the other toys. Trains of cars, jumping jacks, woolly animals on wheels. Gee, said Winona at last, I'm getting tired. When do we spend our dimes? Dimes, said the clerk, who had told her the price of the doll's house. Dimes? She settled her eyeglasses on the thin ridge of her nose and looked at the four severely. When she had turned away, Betsy whispered, Right now. I hope, said Winona, we spend them for something to eat. We don't, but after we've spent them, we go to call on our fathers. And you can't call on four fathers without being invited out to Heinz's restaurant for ice cream. I suppose not, Winona agreed. Well, what do we buy then? Betsy turned and led the way to the far end of the store. There, on a long table, Christmas tree ornaments were set out for sale. There were boxes and boxes full of them, their colors mingling in bewildering iridescence. There were large, fragile balls of vivid hues. There were gold and silver balls. There were tinsel angels, shining harps and trumpets, gleaming stars. Here, said Betsy, here we buy. She looked at Winona, bright-eyed, and Winona looked from her to the resplendent table. Nothing, Tacy tried to explain, is so much like Christmas as a Christmas tree ornament. You get a lot for 10 cents, said Tib. They gave themselves then with abandon to the sweet delight of choosing. It was almost pain to choose. Each fragile bauble was gayer, more enchanting than the last. And now they were not only choosing, they were buying. What each one chose, she would take home. She would see it on the Christmas tree. She would see it year after year, if she were lucky and it did not break. They walked around the table, touching softly with mittened hands. Betsy at last chose a large red ball. Tacy chose an angel. Tib chose a rosy Santa Claus. And Winona chose a silver trumpet. They yielded their dimes, and the lady with the eyeglasses wrapped up 4 packages. Betsy, Tacy, Tib, and Winona went out into the street. The afternoon was drawing to a pallid close. Soon the street lamps would be lighted. Which father shall we call on first? Winona asked. Mine is nearest Heinz Restaurant, said Betsy. They walked to Ray's shoe store, smiling and holding Christmas in their hands. Ho, 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 ho. What a wonderful story! If you enjoyed hearing about Betsy, Tacy, Tib, and Winona, you can come to the library and read all of the books about them. Merry Christmas, everyone. We'll see you next year.